All right, so we're back with part two. Part one, we built the virtual. We talked about OpenSUSE and SUSE Linux Enterprise, and now we're going to go ahead and get started with the installation. So what you're going to see here is very typical of Linux, where we get this scrolling and you know, it's if you look at all the different hardware that's out there that uses Linux, it's really quite amazing. Okay. So we're getting our worm crawling across the screen down there at the bottom. I'll go ahead and pause the video and wait for that to catch up. So this is the first screen that we come to, and you can see it's still working on stuff. But over here on the left, it gives us a rundown of what it's going to do as it's working through it. And then we'll get to places where we have to make decisions every so often. Okay. All right, so here's the first decision point. Now, we're in the US, and oftentimes installations are kind of defaulted to us. But if we were using some other keyboard, we could select that here, and then we could test it, which is very nice. You could actually test it and be sure that everything's working. We've got our license agreement. It's open source, but there's still a license agreement. There's what they call the GNU general license, and there's conditions and criteria about how open source software is used. Okay. So anyways, our language and our keyboard language, and you can see we're down here as we're working our way down the list. So we'll go ahead and continue. So this screen here talks about, I didn't pause it. This was almost immediate here, and it jumped down. But I want to mention to you about this tool right here, YAST2. We call it YAST, and it stands for yet another software tool. I think that's correct. This is how Linux is. There's a term that they call it, playful cleverness. I think that was coined by Richard Stallman. When you look at the names of different packages and things in Linux, there's always kind of a bit of a tongue-in-cheek with how they name things. Now, so what it's asking here is YAST. YAST is unique to SUSE. It is. You won't find YAST, to my knowledge, in any other Linux distributions, and it's one of the things that makes the SUSE family fairly inviting for Windows, for people with Windows backgrounds. Okay, so yet another software tool. So this thing about activating online repository. So the system has an active internet connection. So what this is that Linux has these libraries of code. There's many of them. And because it senses that this virtual machine is actually connected to the internet, it's saying, hey, since you're on the internet, I can go ahead and activate some online software stores and make those available to you as part of your installation. Now, they're not required. If it was not connected to the internet, it just wouldn't give you this option. Okay. So do you want to activate them? And I'll say, yeah, I'd like to go ahead and take advantage of that. And so now it's going out and getting a list of the most common. So here they are. Okay. And there's some that are commonly deployed, and others that are for, like, testing. Notice you've got debug here, untested, source code, debug code. So what we have here are the main ones. These are the standard ones, and we're going to go and accept those. But I want you to understand what's there, okay? All right, and it gives you some definition of them. Okay. I'll go ahead and pause the video again. Okay, I had the video paused for probably about a minute and a half. Okay. And so it added the online repositories, and I believe that it also, in the background, just verifies that we have the latest packages to install. It didn't say that, but I believe that's part of when you're connected online. It looks at the installation ISO file, and if there's anything that's new or changed, it then will bring the updated version and go ahead and install it right off the bat. So what we have now warrants a moment of explanation. Linux is very different than Windows. Okay, I know you knew that, but one of the things that makes it different is that Linux itself is an engine that doesn't need a graphical user interface. Now Now, Windows 10 won't work without a graphical user interface. In fact, any of the Windows desktop operating systems, a graphical user interface is absolutely required. Microsoft has a variation of their server product, the later server families that can also run command line only. Okay, but the world of Linux started with command line only, and graphical user interfaces have been added as a convenience, where Windows went the opposite route. Windows was initially, for many years, graphical user interface required, and then in recent years has offered a stripped down command line only version for some of their server products. Okay. Now with Microsoft, it's either yes, you have, they call it the desktop experience on a server. Yes, you have desktop experience, or no, you don't. But here with Linux, you can actually pick what desktop experience you want, or if you don't want one at all. Okay. Now this particular distribution, OpenSUSE, it can be configured to function as a server, or it can be configured to function as a workstation. It really can. And you think, well, what's the difference between a server and a workstation? Well, it's becoming less and less on both platforms. On Windows servers and Windows clients, Windows 10 and Server 2019, they're becoming more and more like each other. Now, there's definitely some differences. And in the Linux world, it's almost a blurry line. You can, like, it didn't say OpenSUSE, Leap, desktop, or workstation. It's just OpenSUSE 15 Leap. In the second year, we use the same distribution as a server. Here, we're using it. We're going to install it more in the role of a workstation. So I tell you all that because I'm just wanting to help you understand the world of Linux. So these are out of the box choices you can make for different desktops. You can even have more than one. Okay, I know it's so different, but what we're going to do is we're going to go with the KDE and Plasma. KDE and GNOME desktops have been around for a very long time, and we can do command prompt only. We could go with the server role, but we're going to go with the KDE Plasma. It's a nice desktop environment, and if you read the description of it, it just makes mention that it's a familiar working environment for those from a Windows background. Okay, this screen here popped up right away. I paused the video, but immediately unpaused it. What I want to talk with you about here is that this is notice with the top here what it says, suggested partitioning. So with Linux, there are no drive letters. It takes whatever hard drive space that you gave it. We gave it 30 gig, which isn't very much. And then it says, okay, here is a suggested way to divide up the 30 gigabytes into partitions. And so there's no drive letters, but there's partitions. And here's what it's talking about here. So GPT, these are references to the partition, might say partition name. If we had multiple hard drives, they would show up. It's all kind of in the name here. But what we've got here, if you think about our 30 gig, you can see that it's made one. This is actually one, and then it's broken up into three within that. Hope that makes sense. If you wanted to customize it, you could do that. You could go into guided, or you can go into expert. Let's say that we were going to build a web server, and we knew we wanted like so much space for our web content, so much space for like caching. You can do all that here. You can customize how the hard drive is divided up. Now some things you got to have, well actually many of them you got to have. It's just how big are they in relationship to each other. And in our case, we're going to go with the defaults. I almost always go with the defaults. I guess because when we install Linux, or when I install Linux, it often falls into what I would call general purpose installations. So we've got a swap file, and these are different file systems. Another thing that's different with Linux is Windows, we've got NTFS and FAT32, and Linux, you've got like a dozen different file system types, some of which are certainly more popular than others. And here it's using BTRFS. Okay. On this screen here, we just need to identify what time zone we're in. And let's see if we can find it here. That's the closest one for us, being that we're in Pacific time. It uses the network time protocol to set the time on your install. Now I want you to see what happens here. Again, this is something that's different between Windows and Linux, is that I can give it, I'm going to give it my name here. Okay, but notice what it did for username. Linux is case sensitive, and this is like proper etiquette. I wouldn't necessarily call it syntax, but proper etiquette, in that usernames are lowercase. So this will be my display name, and this will be my login name. And when you install, I'd like you to do the same. You can use, first name only, first and last, whatever you like to do. It's up to you. And then also with your password, go ahead and pick whatever password you're comfortable with. Okay, now down here at the bottom is a couple of important things. Okay, the first one is that use this password for system administration. This is kind of like the first user you install on Windows. The first user is given administrator privileges, or admin rights, we say. And that's the same thing here. We're creating this user, and we're saying that this user, by checking this box, can elevate, or can respond to become super user. Now, the super user on Linux is called root. And sometimes when you install Linux, you'll actually assign a password to the root user. In this case, we're not doing that. We're creating our own user account of our own choosing, but we're saying that the account that we're creating by checking this box, we're saying that account can be used for super user privileges, or root privileges, or from a Windows perspective, and as mentioned here, system administration. Okay. Now the automatic login is your choice. It's a little bit of I think a security risk to allow auto login. But if you do allow auto login, you will still, whenever you go to do anything important, you'll need to provide password. Okay, so I normally don't do this. Now we're doing teaching and training, and I'm gonna do it. And I'm gonna do this so that when I reboot it, it'll log right in. But if this was a production server, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do automatic login. Okay. Now again, minimal wait here. It just actually, I didn't pause the video at all, and you can see how far we've worked our way down the list. And what I want to talk to you about here is it's getting everything now ready to actually install. And what we can do now is we can click on these topics, and we can make additional changes or customizations. And the one I want to show you is, I want to show you the software one. All of them, we can click on it and we can go in and make further changes. Okay, all of them we can, but again, I just want to show you software. So here's what it's suggesting. Okay, it's suggesting that these packages be installed. All right, but I want you to see what's going on here. Okay, now the checkboxes indicate a package has been selected to be installed, and they're grouped into, like, catalogs, so to speak. Base technology here. Okay, if it was a laptop, we would check that, and it would give us tools like measuring battery life, and preserving battery life, and wireless stuff. Okay, go into the graphical environment. We've got lots of different choices here. Okay, desktop functions, right? Okay, games. Normally in a business environment, we would uncheck this box, right? I'm going to leave it checked because once we're done with this project, I'm going to encourage you to play with Linux a little bit. Here we've got KDE stuff. Here we've got server stuff. Just again to reiterate that this could be installed as a server. Print server, web server, LAMP is like a database, PHP kind of a package, DHCP, these different, you can even do virtualization. Priority, normally I select this because within the proprietary packages, that's where you'll find like drivers for video cards. A lot of the video card vendors have chosen not to make their drivers open source. Like, well, just different vendors have. And so if you select that, you can get things like codecs that allow you, because codecs, are many of those are not open source, and video drivers, many of those are not open source. Let's just go ahead and I'll go ahead and do that, and it's up to you whether you want to or not. So it just tells you your packages are not under the open source license. Okay. All right. Now, not everything is here. There's other stuff, but this is just like the big stuff, or kind of like, at installation, we're going to choose it. And these are referred to as packages. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. I'm going to accept that. Takes us back then to this screen, and it looks at everything that we did. And again, I could jump in and I could do, I could do static network configurations. I could turn the firewall on. I could do all kinds of stuff from here, but we're just going to continue. Okay. Now, information required for base install is now complete. So if we go to install, it's actually going to begin the installation now. We'll let it run for a minute, and then I'll pause the video. So we've got the two bars down here, and it shows you what it's doing, and up here it tells you from what repositories it's pulling down different stuff. Okay, and this will go on for probably about 15 minutes. So let me pause the video, and I'll check back with you when it's done. All right, so the installation finished, and it took 22 minutes. And then it automatically rebooted. It told me it was going to. It said, counting down, rebooting in 7, 10 seconds, and so on. One thing I want to show you, I've seen this a couple of times. I've done a couple installations today and prep for the video. When the installation finished and it rebooted, my screen here went black, and it stayed black, and it never came back. And so what I have to do, or what you might find, if you get a black screen, like if it goes into screensaver for whatever, if you get a black screen, go ahead and close it, and then come back into Hyper-V and double click on it again, and it'll open back up for you. And so we did check that box to say auto login, so it did, but it will prompt us if we go to do something that is like administrative level or root level. It will prompt us to provide our password. So what I want to do is I'm going to wrap up this video and then do a third video where we just come in and play with it a little bit. I just want to show you a couple things and just kind of kick the tires a little bit, and then we'll call it good for this project. So I hope your installation is going well or went well, and I'm going to close up this video, and I'll see you in one last video.